Hey everybody, welcome to SoFlo Vegans Live. I am your host and founder of SoFlo Vegans, Sean Russell, and today we're doing a little something different. We're doing a little something different right now. We normally record these podcast episodes and then we put it out. So we decided to invite you to the conversation, give you a little bit of behind the scenes to see what's going on. And our guest that I want to talk to is Elysabeth Alfano. Now, Elysabeth has been on our show, on our platform before in the past through our live expo. So we're glad to have her back. So let me bring Elysabeth up right now. And Elysabeth, welcome back to SoFlo Vegan. So glad to have you with us.
Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be here. And I sure do love lives. So I do live all the time. So this is my wheelhouse.
So I'm going to have you start off. We have a tradition here on our recordings. We have our guests give us their vegan origin story. Like, how did you get started? What's your X-Men origin story?
Yeah. Okay. I have to say my story, I think, is sort of a pretty good one. I'd been trying to go vegan my whole life. Literally at the age of 5, I can remember being at the dinner table and not being able to chew meat. And of course, I couldn't have told you at 5, oh, there are factory farming issues or something like this. But I just knew inherently that I did not want this stuff. And it wasn't just because it was harder to chew. It's just the fat and the gristle. It just seemed wrong. And that's all I could tell you. It was a strictly visceral reaction. It just seemed wrong and I didn't want to eat it. Well, my folks, whom I love, they love me back. There's no problem. They're wonderful parents. They were like, oh God, our kid's going to die. She doesn't have protein. So they punished me pretty heavily. They said, if you don't eat that meat, you cannot leave the dinner table. And everybody else got to hang out together, watch TV, and I'd be at the dinner table for hours, 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I mean, I couldn't do it. I wasn't faking it and I wasn't being capricious. I really couldn't do it. And they were like, nope, you need your protein. So then I started hiding the meat all over the house. Like I'd hide it under the table legs. I'd put it in my pants pockets. I'd dig to the bottom of the garbage can and I'd hide it in the bottom of the garbage. And then I put all the other garbage back on top of it. And of course I'm only 7 now at this point or something. They found me lying and then they really punished me. So they sent me to my room. And so fast forward way into my adult years, I think in my head, this is what you have to do. This is the rule. Everybody eats meat. You have no choice. You have to do it. And this is what it means to be an adult. We do the things that we know are wrong. We do them anyway. We look the other way. We don't, because by now, of course, I know about factory farming, but we just say, well, toughen up. And that's what it means. And so I was living with this like, God, that's awful. That feels rotten. So I was this kind of closet, vegetarian. I mean, I would have pepperoni pizza with everybody else when it was ordered. I would never sort of say, hey, could you get just veggie for me? I never ordered a steak or anything. I couldn't even tell you the last time I had chopsticks. Is that what they're called? Or pork chops, pork chops or lamb chops. It's been forever. But, when meat was around, I would do what everybody else was doing. And then my nephew came home from the University of Oregon, and he's an athlete. And he walked in the door, Thanksgiving, first time back from school. And he said, oh, yeah, coach told me if I want to play for the team, no meat, no dairy. And I'm way into my 40s at this point. And I'm like, you mean you got a professional to give you permission? I'd been waiting for permission my entire life. And I was vegan that sentence. I was like, I knew it. It didn't feel right. And I was right all along. And I knew it. And I went through all the stages that everybody goes through. At first I was like, this information has been kept from me. And I feel very mad about it. But I got all the benefit and joy out of it like everybody else does. So I didn't stay mad for too long. So I lost a little bit of weight. Woohoo. I have a lot of energy naturally. So I got some extra energy, which is always great. But here was the big payoff for me. I had been carrying around this heavy weight, and I did not know how heavy it was, of going through life doing something that I knew was wrong and I didn't believe in. And it was not always in the front of my mind. Sometimes it was, but sometimes, like I say, I'd have pepperoni pizza with everybody and I would just like, okay, I'd just do it. But when I stopped eating meat, this thing I'd never wanted to do, And I didn't have to sort of forget about factory farms and pretend I hadn't seen them, even though I had. And I didn't have to live as an adult with this disconnect. I lifted a huge weight and I hadn't realized how heavy that weight was and how much it was holding me back. So the benefits for me of going vegan are multidimensional. Oh dear, I don't have your audio. Hey ho, how can that be?
It's the power of clicking the unmute button.
Yes. Oh, that's a powerful button. Yeah.
So I always love hearing the different origin stories from our guests, because I know our audience, they'll hear it and there may be something in your story that resonates with them. And it also may reflect somebody that's in their life, and you may have given them some insight on how to support them. So thank you so much for sharing that. And with that being said, let's talk a little bit about your background, which is very impressive, especially when it comes to being a communicator and broadcasting a message for this community. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing.
I'm very happy to do that. I have to let the cat in, so I'm coming right back.
All right. So I want to take this.
Sorry for that.
Okay. jump right on and pick it up.
Cat's crying up a storm. So it's funny. Everybody thinks of me as a journalist, really. I think that's, of course, how they see me the most. I have 2 different shows. One is called the Plant-Based Business Hour, and that's really where I spend the majority of my time. I do it live. It's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and then it always goes to Vegconomist magazine, and it goes to my podcasts, and sometimes it goes to the Beat magazine. So I'm primarily on Plant-Based Business Hour, but I also have an interview show called the Awesome Vegans Influencer Series, which is doubling as a radio show as well. So it's very exciting that I can be out there so much in journalism, but that is a complete side hustle. That is actually not my area of expertise, if you will. My area is business. It's what I went to school for. It's where I got my master's degree and MBA. And my first job was working in consumer packaged goods with the Kellogg's company. I was on Frosted Mini Wheats and Special K. I've got some very fun Special K stories for you if you want. And then when I left big Fortune 500 companies, I decided to start my own business. And I had that business for 10 years before I exited. And then I went into investing. And when you're doing some personal investing, you have a whole heck of a lot more time than you did as an entrepreneur working on your own business. Because, all entrepreneurs will tell you it is 24/7 all the time. But when I started investing, I was like, oh, I have a little bit of time. So I picked up journalism as a hobby. It's not what I studied. It's really not where my area of expertise is. But I thought, there's some really interesting people in the world that I would like to speak with. And I will never be able to step in their shoes, but if they'll give me an interview for an hour, I could learn so much. So it was just sort of a selfish hobby, if you will. And I thought, well, they're never going to talk to me unless I say, hey, I can promote this interview and help you as well. So I just kind of did it as this side gig. And then when I went plant-based, vegan, I was like, okay, now the only thing I report on is vegan issues because that's what's the most meaningful and that's what I'm going to do in my life. It took me so long to get here that's all I'm going to do from here on out. So that's how I landed in the vegan journalism world. But my background is really business. And that's why I started my consulting company, Plant Powered Consulting. And so even though you don't see it because it's behind the scenes, 80% of where I spend all my time, 85% is with my clients, my brands, and those are the plant-based brands that I'm really, bringing to the forefront in the marketplace. So everyone thinks of me for journalism, but really it's the plant-powered consulting.
And it's interesting. One of the takeaways I heard is that you started off working with companies like Kellogg's and that particular industry, and now you're focusing mainly on plant-based brands. So what has been your experience between working with both, ends of the spectrum, a company that caters towards, the total consumer base versus one that's not true. As I'm hearing myself say it, even plant-based brands, they're not just making it for plant-based consumers, they're making it for the masses. But what are the differences that you've noticed between those 2 different types of companies?
Well, hard to say because I was working for Kellogg really in the beginning of my career. So it was a while ago now. And the world has changed so much and business has changed. And, nobody was really thinking about vegans or vegetarians there. It just so happens that Special K is vegan. But that really wasn't the focus. And it was even hard to get Kellogg at the time. This is back in the day too, so kind of surprising though. It's hard to get them to focus on lactose intolerant folks. They just really weren't wrapping their minds around that. And of course, cereal goes with milk. So it's something you'd think they'd want to be conscious of. But it was a little bit hard to get that on the radar back in the day. But really what's changed, I think, is the pace of innovation. And, when you work with mission aligned brands, it's just everything is pedal to the metal. And when I interviewed Seth Tibbett, the founder of Tofurkey, on my show, Plant-Based Business Hour, we talk about this. The secret weapon of vegans is that they're so mission aligned that their heart is in it so hard. There just is no failing. Just there's no turning back. So I think that's something that's very different than when you're with a Fortune 500 company and there's all these layers and there's so many management levels and this kind of thing. So that's very different. And I like working with entrepreneurs. I prefer to be with the people who are, nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky every day.
Now, I know you could appreciate this. Back in 2019, the headline was, "It's the year of the vegan."
Right, yeah.
And of course, 2020 was the year that it was. So how do you think that is held up from 2019 until today, as far as like trending and the continued growth of everything?
I mean, if 2019 was the year of the vegan, then 2021 is the year of the flexitarian. I mean, it's just, it's trending like smack. I mean, it's going crazy off the wall. And we always said that there would be this kind of exponential growth, that you'd see the if you can see with my microphone, you'd see the curve go like this. And I think you're going to start to see that hockey stick like curve happen in terms of growth, because COVID was this enormous accelerant. I think we all know that. People started to focus on, how can I get healthy? And perhaps I shouldn't be letting the government decide for me. Perhaps I should be doing my own research and really advocating for myself. So people had more time, and then they had this fuel under their seat of their pants, which was COVID and staying healthy. So a lot of people are getting much more information, and that information is out there because of people like you, and then also me, and then also just Google is so great for that. So COVID was an accelerant. And then also you see non-vegan companies, meat and dairy companies, starting to come to the market with their own products. And this kind of addition to the marketplace, where I can't say that they're lessening their meat and dairy products, but they are at least adding some vegan products. And so having these kind of advertising budgets and these kind of distribution channels available to vegan brands, even if it's not a vegan company, but it's a vegan brand, these are enormous accelerants. And I think you're just going to continue to see this kind of exponential growth with the flexitarian in mind.
And so that's interesting, because I know deep within the vegan community, there's always a conversation between reducing reductionarianism. I'm messing.
Reducitarian.
There you go. Flexitarianism, and as far as like the message and the actual movement behind the vegan community. Now, when it comes to the business space, you have a lot of these businesses that may not be particularly mission driven, and creating those products or developing those product lines. Do you see an opportunity for the expansion of plant-based versus vegan in terms of the conversation of flexitarian, in order to see that growth, and how could that potentially play a role into the vegan movement?
So this is such a huge conversation. Ultimately, how are we going to communicate with the consumer? And this has been changing over time. Vegan didn't have the right connotations. Then we moved to plant-based. But what is plant-based? Something shouldn't be, but they can say that it's plant-based, even if it has some other elements in there that aren't from plants, but the majority is plants. So it's plant-based. So, this is very tricky. I think both of those terms are going to go away. I think it's going to become so ubiquitous that one isn't going to have to take a stand for one's health or for one's ethics. It's going to be that there is only one way to make food, and it is the most efficient way. Efficiency always wins out in business, and meat and dairy are so wildly inefficient. They need time, they need land, they need water, they take away trees, which, oh, hey, we need those trees because trees pull carbon out of the air, and we've got a climate crisis going on. So it would be great if we could leave those trees where they are, but we cut down those trees so that we can grow grains. Do we give those grains to people? No, we give them to animals, and then we give those animals land and water and time. Land and water and time. Do we have food yet? No, we have to give them more land, water, time, and grains. We have to cut down more trees. Inefficient, wildly inefficient. And then even at that, it doesn't work on its own. So if you happen to be someone of the business mind and you believe in free economy to the extent that that's possible, then you would be against subsidies. And these businesses don't run without subsidies. They're not self-sustaining in that way. And there aren't the resources on the planet to sustain that kind of inefficiency. So while there are folks that have vested stakes in making these businesses stay around because they benefit from subsidies, nobody else does. The consumer doesn't. The planet doesn't. We just can't waste that kind of those kind of resources. So I think the conversation, now I'm talking sort of at least a decade away to get this kind of conversation in place, but it's going to be so ubiquitous with so many products out there that don't have animals in them. We won't need to distinguish anymore. It'll just be the way we eat. So I think those conversations are going to take longer. In the short term, you're still going to have, plant-based and vegan and flexitarian, but the best kind of messaging is when you don't have to say it's free from or it's without this, or it's better when you can say, hey, you get this and you get that, and it's really wonderful. It's not what you're not getting; it's all the things you are getting. And I think we're not even going to have to say it's plant-based or anything like that. I think we're just going to be able to say tastes great, really juicy, and here it is for the same price. That will be the trick. Got to get that in line.
So I'm going to take a quick detour from the business conversation, and I want to dip a little bit into your background as a chef.
Ooh,
So
okay.
when we had you on our expo, you were kind enough to do a food demonstration for us. So take us a little bit into how you got started with cooking and some of the things you've done with that.
Yes. Okay. So if journalism is hobby number one, then cooking is hobby number two. I mean, I'm not schooled as a chef, but I'm Sicilian and I grew up cooking, and cooking was a huge part of my childhood. I love to cook. I love to be innovative in the kitchen. I can't stand to follow recipes. I want to make my own stuff. Either I go into the refrigerator and I see what's going to go bad, and then I just challenge myself to make something with that food, or I just invite people over to my house pre-COVID, and I say okay, I know this person likes this and that person likes this, and I'm going to make stuff. So I love the challenge of being in the kitchen, and it's very relaxing for me. So a workout is relaxing, and chopping vegetables, very relaxing. So I think it's just my passion and enthusiasm that gets me on to things like WGN TV. They have me back probably every 2 months to do cooking on television. I've cooked at a bunch of veg fests. My graduate school, where I did my MBA, they invited me to speak, which was wonderful. And then they said, oh, we saw on YouTube that you cook. Could you cook and speak on business at the same time? I mean, people just love, of course, we're all zoomed out, right? There's too many Zoom meetings. So people just love to do something interactive. And it's funny because right before I hopped on this call, my graduate school asked me back again to do the same thing because it had been so popular. So I'll be back talking about business and cooking for the Thunderbird Global School of Management.
And cooking, I love to cook too, not quite to the level where I'm gonna give people my food, but it is one of the things that I picked up from going vegan and enjoy doing. So would you have any advice for anyone that's getting it, maybe they just went vegan or they like to cook but they don't take themselves too seriously in they don't look at it as potentially being something that can go a little bit further? What are some things that worked for you to kind of increase that love and that passion?
Well, first I'll say go to elizabethalfano.com/recipes. So there are a lot of really easy recipes. They're all my own, and they're things that I've done while I've been goofing around in the kitchen. And I would say just that. Don't let the kitchen be daunting for you. Cooking is all about you. So there is no one way to do things. There is no right way. There is no wrong way. If you don't like salt, don't use it. If you don't like it spicy, don't do it. It's really about your creative expression in the food. So I would say that. Have fun with it. Then I'd also say, don't overthink it, but if possible, plan ahead. You can't paint something if you don't have a selection of colors. You can't really cook if you haven't done a little bit of the shopping. Now, shopping's gotten a lot easier as we all go direct to consumer and Instacart and this kind of thing. So another benefit, if one could say this, from COVID, so you can get your hands on a lot of plant-based things easier. But even then, even more than the plant-based products, which I'm so proud to be working with so many plant-based brands through my company, Plant Powered Consulting. Even more than the brands, get your hands on spices. So my really fast down and dirty tip would be get your hands on paprika, soy sauce, and cumin. Right there, you're going to have the base for the majority of the meat flavors. You can, continue to spice it from there, but those three things are already going to get you set.
And what are some of your go-to tools that you use in the kitchen?
Go-to tools. Got to have the right knife. I mean, the fastest way to go insane is try slicing a tomato with the wrong knife. You can just kill yourself first. I mean, so nothing really. I mean, yes, I have a Cuisinart, but I went on Amazon.com, got a refurbished one. It was like $57, so you don't have to go like, wow, Cuisinart, $400. You don't have to do that. I just got a refurbished one. I've had it now for 7 years. It works just fine. I use it all the time. Everybody likes a slow pot, a hot pot. I've never done it, but just because I'm so used to old school, I'm just so used to like a pot and boiling water for my beans or whatever. So I just do it that way. But I know that's handy for a lot of people. I think one thing that my boyfriend turned me on to, which I think is great, it's called the mandolin, and it allows you to slice things really fine. And so you can make a salad with something like watermelon radish or something like that and really make it pretty by having these slender slices. But I almost hate to mention that because it's not a common term, the mandolin. And so I don't want to frighten people by thinking that, oh, you need all these exotic things. You don't. You need a good knife.
All right, so let's go right back into the business talk, because I know there are a lot of business owners, small business owners that could use some support right now in terms of just figuring out how to navigate this new world that we're in. So what has been the temperature? Let's start off with this. Like, what has been the temperature of the small businesses that maybe you've heard about, in the nation right now in terms of everything that's been going on?
Mania. That's the temperature. The temperature is mania. So I just spoke with a grocers association. Every state has like the Oregon Grocers Association, the Arkansas Grocers Association, these kind of association groups. And I was speaking with one of them yesterday, and they were saying they have so many plant-based brands reaching out to them that they're a little bit like a deer in the headlights. They're not sure how to make a decision on what kind of products to bring into the grocery store. So, and people are starting to anticipate that COVID will end and that things might resume some sort of level of what it used to be. I don't think it'll ever go back to being what it was, but so they're starting to think about bringing in new products, taking a little bit, not a risk, but just kind of getting out of their status quo. For the longest time, grocery stores were just restocking what they knew sold, and they didn't want to think out of the box at all. Well, that's kind of changing, and they know that plant-based is the hottest trend possible, but they're having trouble making decisions because there's so many brands coming to the market. So I will say that the temperature is mania, but for as much competition as there is happening, there are still so many white spaces. So if you have an idea that you think nobody else does well, definitely go pedal to the metal. And along with the mania is investing mania. So you're seeing a lot more money roll into the space. That's something that I help a lot of my brands with, is putting together that investor deck, the marketing part, but also the financial part, so that they can present to investors and start to raise money. And that money is there. So that's part of the mania, is that people want to invest.
So right now, I know of a lot of plant-based businesses, brands, like selling like vegan chicken online and what have you. Is there Does it make sense right now to try to get placed into supermarkets? Because I know there's a lot that goes into that and sort of filling those orders versus just trying to expand their online footprint. Like what direction probably would you, I don't want to say advise because, but what are your thoughts behind, just maybe sticking to online sales or trying to get into those larger stores?
Mhm. Okay, so it depends on the product itself, but let's just say it is a typical CPG product. I would say getting into these stores requires a little bit of money because there is some placement fees, and usually you need a distributor that's going to distribute from you to all of these stores, and they help you pick up, let's say, like 300 Sprouts across the nation or something like this. And in addition, then you have to be able to supply that grocery store. So it's one thing if you have a natural grocery store in your 5-mile radius and you can drop off to that one store. It's another thing to supply Jewel Osco, if you guys have that in your neck of the woods, Jewel Osco across the country, Kroger's across the country, Ralph's across the country. So Whole Foods across the country. So you really have to be ready. It's a commitment of money, and it's a commitment of production. So you have to be ready to scale up like that. If you're not ready, I think a couple things. Direct to consumers is great, particularly if you don't have a frozen product. If you have a frozen product, it gets very expensive. You have to ship overnight and dry ice. And then there's the environmental question, which doesn't always sit well with everybody. So, if you don't have to ship a frozen product, then direct to consumer is really great. Your margins are better, and you can really build that online engagement. So you want to have that very bespoke conversation with your consumer base. You have to really know them. So one of the mistakes, I think, I'm kind of going a little bit all over the map here, so it's like business 101 in 10 minutes. But one of the mistakes that I see brands make is they think, well, I'm plant-based, so I naturally have a market. It's not true. Being plant-based is absolutely no longer enough. You have to know who you are going for in that plant-based realm. Is it flexitarians? Is it vegans? Is it millennials? Is it Gen Z? Is it older people who are concerned about their health? Gen Z being more concerned about the environment, animals, and kind of the way to move through the world. Who are you going for? You really have to know that. And if you can hone in on that and make that experience with them through packaging and through marketing and through socials, make that experience very much like, oh, my brand's my buddy. Like I'm like solidarity with this brand. If you can start developing that kind of relationship, you're going to see great things for your D2C, direct to consumer. And you can build from there because you'll have more money. You'll start making, bigger production lines. Then you start growing your business so you can scale for these grocery stores. Don't get me wrong. Grocery stores are still there. And again, if you are in a large enough city or maybe even a smaller city, but you've got natural grocery stores in your neck of the woods, definitely walk on over there with your product and see if you can start supplying them, because that feedback is invaluable. So there's nothing like interfacing with your consumer. And if you can do that online, great, but you should also be getting that feedback from the grocery store to hear what people say about your product. So you want to know what they're saying, be totally in tune, tweak that product every little bit you can, right for them. And so every place you can get feedback from the consumer is great.
So what if you have someone that has an idea for a product, they have created it, and they're, just maybe doing it at farmers markets and what have you, but they are interested in doing that. Um, what could be that next step for them to get the knowledge that you just mentioned, or to really get that hand holding experience? Are there courses out there that are specific to the plant-based? Are there resources online? Like what would you recommend for them for that next step?
Contact me. Contact me. In fact, Sean and I were thinking about doing a class just based on this. I think, we can't answer it all today in this one interview. And there are so many of these how to launch your brand in the current environment type of questions. And I think, circle back with Sean and I, because I think we're thinking about doing this kind of course. And until that course exists, people can reach out to me through my consulting business. Otherwise, if you're not ready for a consultant, or if you don't think you're, at that point yet, or if you're just still thinking about your product, maybe you don't even have a product yet, do that research online. I mean, Instagram's great for that, right? Start seeing what other people are doing and who's successful. That's just a very good way to kind of teach yourself, for lack of a better expression. Otherwise, circle back with me and stay tuned for maybe a class that Sean and I will do.
And yeah, I'm excited to figure that out, because there are so many businesses right now that are itching. They're looking to expand. And one of the surprising things last year, just in South Florida, because that's where I'm mainly focused my energies, is the amount of businesses that have opened up during the pandemic, during 2020. And I mean, on the surface level, it looks like they're doing well and they're growing and expanding. And, there's always two sides of that story. So, I'm interested to see what 2021 has to offer. And along with that, it comes, and we're going to go a little bit into the communication side. I love the fact that you have all these different aspects to what you do. When I had you on the expo, the conversation was communication, how to kind of get the most out of it. And a lot of people have jumped on and started creating podcasts, creating live streams, and using that as another way to get their name out there and show people what they can do. For you, what have you found to be some of the best practices that have helped you create content on a consistent basis?
Well, I'm back to two things. One, what Seth Tibbetts said. I mean, I just love it. I mean, remember, I was waiting decades to be vegan. I was held back from being vegan. So I can't waste any more time. I am completely dedicated and so passionate. So like Seth Tibbetts said, it's the superpower secret weapon of vegans. And then I'll say what you just said. I'm consistent. I am consistent. I am out there consistently all the time. And I think that dedication to consistent communication gives you your flow. You find that flow by doing it. And I've always learned in life by doing. I mean, I've gone to school too. And of course I read books and I study and I talk to people, but I learn by doing. And so just do it. It couldn't be any easier, right? We all have the technology now at this point. So, hit me up again if you'd like some tips perhaps on public speaking. That's another class that I was going to give with maybe another organization, but maybe Sean and I'll do it too. I think there's lots of tips and tricks for public speaking, but the big one is just being consistent.
And I know it could get frustrating too when you're starting off, and a lot of people who are doing it aren't just only doing that. They're they may be a lawyer, they may have another profession, and they're just using it as a vehicle to get their name out and such and so forth. So in terms of getting started, I agree with you. Consistency is huge. And then there's the technical aspect of it. What's a good way? Like, let's say someone doesn't, let me speak to a very specific audience. You mentioned this earlier. We're looking at someone who has never created a video, a podcast, a live stream in their life, but they use Instagram, they use Facebook. They're, they have some experience online. What would you say would be a good investment in terms of technology? Where should they start?
Oh, okay. You should 100% start with lighting. I know that sounds like, well, isn't that like step number 7? Eeks, lighting is really super important. So I would say lighting first. The rest you probably already have. You probably already have a decent phone. You probably already have a computer, that webcam for Zoom or StreamYard or what have you. So, and I have a very simple mic. I have a very simple mic. My mic's like $50 or something. And then lighting is really what makes the difference. And lighting is going to make you feel good about yourself on camera. I think that's really the hard thing for people. It's not figuring out the technology because it's all there and the majority of people are using it anyway. It's that people have trouble seeing themselves on camera. And lighting's going to help you with that. But you are still muted, sir.
And audio.
And audio, yes.
That
yes.
was a
Hit
illustration
your unmute button.
of why audio is important, because
Yes,
if you
right.
can't hear you, I mean, there's no point in it.
And there is no interview.
No, it's exciting, kind of where everything's going, the shift that we've had to go on in order to continue to grow, and lighting, audio, most video like you don't have to expend a lot of money on the video, because like you said, the lighting will make up for that. But also you can just tell by looking at it. I worked with a lot of children for several years, teaching them how to create video projects and what have you. And for me, it was less about having the perfect equipment, because I want people just to enjoy creating and telling stories, and not being worried about not having the latest camera or the latest device. And so there's a lot of different things you can do. And what I tell them is just use the eye test. Does it look like something that you would see on television? If not, study that. I know when I was younger, I did a lot of tracing. And the concept is very similar. You can look at things side by side and say, okay, what's different? Without having to go deep into the technology. And that's worked a lot in what I've seen. And I'm saying the children because they have that fresh mind. And I guess that's another thing too, that fresh mind of like, forget what just open yourself to what's possible.
Yes, I love that.
So let's go I'm going to pull up your website right now. And I would love for you to, if someone wants to do consulting with you and find out a little bit more about what you have going on, because we touched on a couple of topics, I would love for you to share that information. So as I pull it up right now, there we go.
Hey.
That's you.
That's me.
So let me take you to the homepage. And if you want to just walk us through, I'll be the navigator.
Sure thing. Well, let's see. I think looking at websites is always like looking at oneself in an interview. You think like, oh, I could change that. I could change that. So, but generally speaking, the largest picture on top that you have there where it says plant-based business expert is just kind of a scrolling banner, if you will. So just kind of gives people an overview of the site. I would say the best place for consulting is to go to that image on the left where it just says commercial consulting and collaborations. And that kind of outlines all the things that I do with folks. So that's a real easy, I think my email is right there, Elysabeth@elizabethalfano.com. And then, so that kind of does it. It kind of lays it out for folks. And I will say there's a little bit of my cooking there, because I do things for corporate restaurants and that kind of stuff. I don't do that much work in that area, but I'm branching out to that. For those of us who are listening just on audio, not live, we're just scrolling through my website right now. But primarily, if you go to my website, elizabethalfano.com, you'll see it right there. It's a big picture on the left that says commercial consulting and collaborations, and you'll see all the things I do. And mostly just reach out to me, because every client is different. Every brand is different. Every sort of marketing that I do for them is 100% bespoke. Everything has to be so tailored to their particular situation. Some of the companies that I work with are plant-based brands, but a lot that I work with are plant-based platforms. So every need is different, and some come to it in different stages. Some are just starting out, some are very well established, and they just need press. They already have their production, their packaging, their branding. They just need extra press. So it just really depends on where you are. So the website is helpful, but ultimately we're going to want to have a conversation. So, reach out.
And I know you've had a lot of conversations with different business owners and experts in the field. Do you have any stories, anything that comes to mind that stands out that you would love to share with us?
Oh, gosh.
Or maybe some of your experiences, anything that is like, whoa.
I've had so many interviews on the Plant-Based Business Hour. So again, on my website, it's pretty clear. You can click consulting, or you can click the Plant-Based Business Hour. You can also click a corporate restaurant button, but you'll see the Plant-Based Business Hour. And if you go to the Plant-Based Business Hour, you'll see this long list of all the people, along with the video and the audio interviews and their pictures. You'll see this long list of people that I've interviewed. So it is very hard to pick out any one. I will tell you about a couple recent ones, and then I'll tell you about one of the very first ones. So I was speaking with the CEO, Didier Toubia, of Aleph Farms. Aleph Farms does clean meat, cultivated meat, cultured meat. They are looking at, with animal cells, cow cells, building a steak, if you will, and being able to grow steak through a lab, we'll call it, but that sounds so antiseptic. It's not. It's just giving the cells all of their natural ingredients that they need, and then it grows through scaffolding from there. So we're talking about this, and he's telling me, so talk about like, oh my God, I'm part of the future. It's so gosh darn exciting. He's telling me there's all this concern about food from COVID. And as we know, it's very frustrating. I'll say this to people because it's so important to me. So what we know from pandemics is that they disrupt food supply and job markets. So if we ever want a stable global economy, we're going to have to rid the planet of pandemics. And to do that, we're going to have to get rid of factory farming, because factory farming breeds all of this pandemic possibility. So you will never have stable global economies while you have factory farming. Just keep that in mind, folks. So he's talking about pandemics and how it's been very disruptive for the Middle East. There's huge concern about food security. And when the pandemic hit, they had disruption in their food supply, as we just discussed. And this was a growing concern for them. He said, so they're working with the Middle East on this research to, be independent food suppliers. So we're not dependent on the Earth's resources. We talked about it in the beginning: land, water, time. If we have another pandemic, or if climate change just allows us less arable land on the planet, that's coming as well. So I said, now hold on, we're talking about Israel here and their neighboring Middle Eastern countries. And I asked him, are you telling me that cultivated meat and having a stable food supply is the answer to peace in the Middle East? And he said, absolutely. So if you can imagine, I'm talking to somebody about Middle East peace because of how we're changing the food supply system. I'm still like getting chills about this. So I just, some of these interviews can be so groundbreaking. I just had an interview with Paul Shapiro from the Better Meat Company. Very much his heart is an animal activist, and he's working with meat companies to get them to change over to plant-based ingredients and get out the meat and put in the plant-based ingredients. And, it's very exciting to talk to someone like him. We were talking about how, Kodak decided not to embrace new technology. They didn't go digital. They also went out of business. Canon embraced digital, didn't fight it. They're doing very well. So I like to say, as we say, we've graduated from the typewriter to the computer, from the landline to the cell phone, and so will we leave animal agriculture and we'll go to cell-based and plant-based meat. And oh wait, one more story. And then at the very beginning, so when I was just starting this, Ethan Brown, CEO, founder of Beyond Meat, he came to my kitchen because this was pre-COVID, so we were doing interviews in person, and he launched the Beyond Meat sausage in my kitchen. So wow. After that, they had a press party, and then the next day they went to sale. But he came to my stove. He's like 6'4". He came to my stove and he cooked Beyond Meat sausage right in my kitchen. We ate it on the show and we launched it on my show.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And how do you, and this is a question for people who have been creating, it's really impressive all the things that you've been able to do and that you're currently doing, and which started off as a hobby, but you do have that background in business. So, that's strong. That's important to have, be able to have that niche to be able to talk and to speak to people. But how did you make those connections, or was it just the consistency and people discovering you? Like, what was that process for you to get on television and do all these amazing things?
There's no one way to Rome, I guess I'll say. part of what I do for my clients is get them press. And so I was just able to do that for myself as well. Um, Knocking on doors, just pitching ideas to different television stations and different radio stations. I do an enormous amount of radio. And just, I don't know, I just knocking on doors, really. I don't think there's no secret code, except you just have to have a very interesting pitch. Your headline is everything. The headline of the press release. You just have to have a very interesting pitch and story. And I've been able to do that. And then once you get into their fold, they continue to ask you back because it's easy for them.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And we're going to wind down on this note. And I always like to give our guests an opportunity to say what's on their heart. And it may not even be anything we've talked about, but this is an opportunity to speak directly to the South Florida community, because that's largely who we create our content for. Is there any advice or anything that's on your mind that you would like to share?
You must advocate for yourselves. Don't farm that out to your doctors. Don't let governments decide for you. You must advocate for yourself. And in doing so, that means you do your research. That means you vote with your dollars. Don't give money to companies that you don't believe in. And you use your voice. It is this enormous gift that you have. So that might be getting on Zoom or doing things like I do. That might be talking to your neighbors. That might mean, getting on social media and saying what you think and believe. But use your voice, use your dollars, and you must advocate for yourselves. And I do believe that when you advocate for yourself, you will choose to advocate for the planet and animals because it's beneficial for you. But you must take control and not be part of the machine, but live your best life. So that's a little bit cliche, live your best life, but don't be part of the machine. Think and act for yourselves with information and use those dollars wisely along with your voice. And you will see when you do align your purchasing power with your values and you couple that with your voice, you will see change. The change you want to see in the world, you will see it. Mute button, but the mute button's still on.
The power of editing.
Oh my
when you
gosh.
listen to this podcast, you will not hear any of this. You are behind the scenes on this live stream. We love you all. So we are going to end on this. Thank you so much for coming on to our show, for speaking with us, for sharing your insight. I really, it's inspirational looking at all of the work that you're doing. And the big part of it, my big takeaway from everything that you're doing is the consistency. Continuing to see you having these amazing guests and just growing and creating that example for other people out there who may want to showcase other businesses. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work that you do, Sean. Really, it takes a village, so thank you as well.
And where can people find more about you?
Oh my gosh, hit me up, Elysabeth at ElysabethAlfano.com is my email. Or if you just want to check out my website, it's ElysabethAlfano.com. And of course, I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn's kind of my jam. That's where I spend most of my time. But I'm on Instagram as well. I'm revamping my Instagram right now. But, if you really want to get the full picture, it's ElysabethAlfano.com. And just reach out to me anytime.
And this part right here, if you're watching right now, and I see a few more people have jumped in, this is a little bit of housekeeping right now. So one of the things we do, and you might have heard on our episodes, we have a little tag at the beginning where the guest says their name, where they're from, and they're with SoFlo Vegan. So now you get a behind the scenes look at how we actually do that, because we of course cut all of this part out and you just hear the end result. But so Elysabeth, if you could do that for me, it's going to sound like, hi, I'm Sean Russell from Lasaurus Media, and I'm with SoFlo Vegans.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Elysabeth Alfano with Plant Powered Consulting and the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm here today with SoFlo Vegans. But the mute button.
Oh my goodness. First of all, I'm curious. When you're full screen, do you hear me right now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's officially over, and we're going to end the broadcast. If you were listening the whole time, we appreciate you. If you jumped on at any point and you have any questions, make sure you could reach out to contact@soflovegans.com or go to soflovegans.com. There'll be more information. And thank you guys so much. And stay tuned for our next live. We're going to do more of these, and I'm going to work on this pesky mute button. Like, I'm going to fire this mute button. It's fired officially.
You're out of here.
I'm gonna bring a new mute button in next show. All right, so look out for that. All right, I'm gonna end the broadcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We appreciate you.